and welcome to Conversations in a Cafe. I'm Lamont, aka ITHL123 on pretty much every social media platform.
Hey guys, Gerald here. Reach me on social media at jfro90.
Hey everyone, I'm Yala and I am at Yala the Singer everywhere. And yeah, my title says it all.
It's Latrell, your favorite actor. Instagram is Latrell.f and Twitter is YGSH Productions.
I'm Andre Asante on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube.
Hey y'all, Jonathan Apollo here. I am Johnny Apollo on Twitter and Instagram, no H in the Johnny.
James McGruder. You can reach me on Petty Nation 24/7 on all platforms. If you don't know how to spell Petty or Nation, I can't help you. Petty Nation 24/7.
And our special guest tonight is returning to the show to discuss the king of pop, Michael Jackson, Dr. Andrew Greene. Yay!
Welcome back.
Thanks for having me again.
And tell everyone where we can find you on social media.
Everyone can find me on Twitter at Andrew Greene 864, and that's Green with an E at the end.
Okay, we hope everyone listening will enjoy tonight's show. After you listen to this episode, if you want to listen to part 1, please click the link in the description box or in the cards. Now, let's get back into the 2003 allegations. Dr. Greene, can you give us a rundown of the 2003 allegations and why they are even more absurd than the 1993 allegations?
Let's start with a brief timeline of how we got to the 2003 allegations, which would eventually lead to the 2005 trial. So Jackson learns of Gavin and the Arvizos for the first time in around June of 2000, while Gavin was actually in the hospital fighting cancer. Michael called him while in the hospital. And then in August of that same year, they meet in person for the first time. Michael would give the family a van later that year, I think sometime in October, and the family would visit Neverland, but MJ was not present whenever they would visit Neverland. Mm-hmm. After the initial meeting, there was very little contact between Michael Jackson and the Arvizos. And that is until 2 years later, in September of 2002, for the filming of Martin Bashir's documentary, and at the request of Martin Bashir himself, that the family is brought back to Neverland. And now, for the first time in almost 2 years, Jackson is within the family's presence. In February of 2003, Living with Michael Jackson airs. Jackson and his team would have to go on the offense at that point in time in an attempt to combat the negative publicity from the deceptively edited documentary.
People say, why is he always with children? Well, I was raised in a world with adults. When kids were playing in bed, sleeping at night, I was up doing clubs. I was doing club dates, 3 in the morning. The striptease would come on after us. You know, we were performing. And we didn't have friends. My brothers were like my friends, but we worked. There was no Christmas, there was no birthdays, and we were very strict Jehovah's Witnesses. So I'm compensating. Nature make sure that I compensate for the lost. So when you come behind my gate, you'll see amusement park, you'll see animals, you'll see everything I never got to do. There's candy everywhere.
But what did Bashir say to Michael Jackson about this day at Neverland? Let's take a look at the footage that was captured by Michael's camera, documenting the interviews.
The problem is, you see, nobody actually comes here and sees it. But I was here yesterday, and I saw it, and it's nothing short of a spiritually kind thing.
He does it all the time.
I know, but I've told him.
A lot of people see it, but
they never talk about it, and I've said this to him, and what I've wanted to convey is those two things. And what we've had the privilege of doing this week is not only talking about the musical genius, but about what we saw yesterday, which was incredible.
I like that you said that he wasn't there when they were staying in Neverland, because that's what I've heard from a lot of people. You know, people are always like, this was a trap. He used this to lure children around him. But I don't think people really understand how busy he was. It's like people would come. I mean, for one thing, it was open to all kinds of events and boys and girls clubs and everything. And people would come and it's like, oh yeah, Michael Jackson's in Cambodia right now. Yeah, he's in Germany. So it's like, yeah, children were all over the place, but half the time he wasn't there. And if they were, sometimes they couldn't come to the house. So, you know, maybe sometimes he would be out there on the Ferris wheel with them, but a lot of times it's like I mean, there's plenty of people who are like, yeah, I went to a birthday party there when I was a kid. I never ever saw him.
That's right. You got it. So you summed it up perfectly. And even in the Bashir documentary itself, guess what it showed? Michael Jackson traveling the world. So Neverland was his home. But I mean, Michael could stay anywhere he wanted to in the world, right? So he was hardly even there because, I mean, he's a shrewd businessman with a business acumen I have to admit that I'm completely jealous of. And, it's something people don't talk about enough with Michael. But this would lead to his 2005 trial. Now, in their allegations, which, by the way, I need to say their allegations are some of the weakest and most absurd allegations to ever enter into a courtroom as a criminal case.
Yeah.
And, before we get into some of the craziness here, it's important to note that the Arvizos had a history of false sex abuse allegations with their JCPenney extortion attempt and allegations levied against David Arvizo, who is their father. Now, they also had a history of targeting celebrities like Chris Tucker, like George Lopez and Vern Watson, basically trying to get money, gifts, and any other favors that they can get from these celebrities.
They had done it before, argued Mesereau. He brought to the stand newspaper editor Connie Keenan, who'd received a phone call from the accuser's mother.
Her son was ill with cancer, and they were losing their house, and they were losing their car because of the medical expenses.
Keenan felt sorry for the sick boy and eventually agreed to run a story. A few weeks later, the mother called again.
She said, "You know what? We didn't make enough money from the first story. Will you run another story?"
The mother's phone call prompted the reporter to carry out more research on the family. She was stunned and shaken to learn that the family was insured and their medical expenses had been covered all along.
It gives me goosebumps. It does. It does. That a mother would use her son to use her son's illness for their own gain.
That was a good point about the Arvizo family's history of targeting and attempting to scam other celebrities. And this was before they even came into contact with Michael. Something that the media rarely discusses because it doesn't fit the narrative that they are trying to spin about Michael. But could you go back to the JCPenney case and give us more details about that? How Janet Arvizo settled that case for 6 figures and didn't report it to social services because she was collecting welfare at the time?
Yeah, so in the JCPenney's trial, what happened is Janet or one of the kids or both, they were caught stealing from JCPenney. The security guards then chase Janet into the parking lot where they get into a bit of a tussle or what have you. And Janet ends up making claims that JCPenney security were doing things like twisting her nipple like 10 times clockwise or some crazy claim like that.
It's now an NBC News exclusive from the Michael Jackson trial. Documents that show how the accuser's mother may have committed perjury and fraud.
When the mother of Jackson's accuser took the Fifth Amendment rather than testify about her welfare history, even the prosecutor said she may have committed perjury in certain of her applications. NBC News has had an exclusive look at those applications for welfare and food stamps. Documents that show the mother claimed she had virtually no assets after she'd received a 6-figure court settlement and tens of thousands in donations for her cancer patient son. On November 5, 2001, the mother's lawyer distributed over $100,000 from JCPenney's and Tower Records, whose security guards, she claimed in a lawsuit, had beaten and sexually assaulted her. The guards denied it, after her older son had been caught with clothes that hadn't been paid for. Yet 10 days after the payout, she said in her welfare applications, under penalty of perjury, that she and her children had no money from any source, no court settlements, no bank accounts, no interest income. She also said they had no health insurance, though her ex-husband's policy was and remains in force.
And when she left there, Janet had no bruises or anything like that on her. It is said that Janet then presents a photo where all of a sudden she has bruises and on her arms and her face and, so on and so forth, just to support her claims even more. Now, where those bruises come from is up in the air. Some claim, though, that those bruises actually come from an abusive relationship, I believe it was, or something to that effect.
Now, the accuser in this case In my opinion, I think we proved this, had assisted his mother in a false sexual harassment claim against J.C. stores. He was a child who took a sworn deposition to support her claim that she'd been sexually attacked in a parking lot by security guards, and we proved it was completely, utterly bogus. We got the intake information at the police department. She didn't have a bruise on her body, a hair out of place, that she didn't need medical attention. She pops up a few weeks later with photographs showing all this bruising. And we had a paralegal from the law firm that represented her in the case who kept calling me in tears. She was just devastated about what to do. She said, "This woman told me it never happened."
This is an example of her using sex to actually get money, false sex abuse claims or false allegations. And if you are receiving various forms of welfare, you have to report all your earnings. Regardless of how you come across that money, you've got to report that so they can cut your pay down or, like I said, just discontinue. So she did not report this to the welfare office, and she was caught. She was caught for and called out for it on trial. So this was something that had the jurors who, by the way, some of the jurors said that Janet, she was very snippy and snappy. She would just snap her fingers at them. They took offense to how she was acting there.
Well, many of the jurors said that they were put off by the testimony from the accuser's mother, as you just saw. They were questioning her credibility and her demeanor.
I disliked it intensely when she snapped her fingers at us. That's when I thought, don't snap your fingers at me, lady.
But the woman had so many credibility problems that in their closing arguments, prosecutors told the jury she had trouble putting two sentences together.
There's no way you can predict going into questioning that a witness is going to snap her fingers at the jury and turn around and look at them and sort of make these monologues that the judge even had to control. You can't plan for that.
Even at one point, this is kind of getting off record. Like, she turns around to one of the Hispanic jurors. As we know, Michael Jackson had a 100% non-black jury pool. So she looks at one of the Hispanic jurors. She looks them in the eyes. She's like, you know how our people do or whatever. And then I think that juror is actually on record saying, no, that's not how our people do or whatever. So, Janet had a lot of issues there.
I just wanted to mention that what you just mentioned about Janet and the juror and how she was and everything. That was the gross part, and what I spoke on a little earlier about how it not being readily available. Leaving Neverland, I took a look at it just to see, the full scope of what they were saying. That is specifically what they use against the facts, and pretty much, oh yeah, they had it out against that poor family in the beginning. Look at how the jurors are making fun of her and how she it's like she was awful. But people gave more into that documentary than the actual trial, so they believed that.
Exactly. But I just think it's interesting that Janet and her children were accused of stealing from JCPenney. The security guards attempted to apprehend her, and then she made sexual abuse allegations against them, got this massive settlement, didn't report any of this, and continued collecting welfare. Once again, I think this shows just what kind of person Janet Arvizo is and who she was raising her children to be. She was literally teaching them to steal, and then if you get caught, you lie your way out of it and make allegations against people that caught you in the lie. It's insane when you think about it. Anyway, let's get back into these absurd allegations. Can you give us a rundown of the timeline of the alleged abuse?
Their timeline makes absolutely zero sense. The prosecution would change this timeline more than once after learning that something in their original complaint would be extremely hard to defend or even impossible in some cases. Then the prosecution would end up changing or tweaking a few things here and there. Most people now who think that Michael Jackson molested Gavin, they think that Michael did so before the Martin Bashir documentary, when in fact, he alleged that the abuse actually started after the documentary aired, which makes no sense at all, because why would Michael Jackson decide to abuse him when he is knowingly under investigation at that point? And on top of that, the whole world is in the uproar. They're on a red alert.
We had a video where he and his family all said it never happened. We had an investigator's statement, audio recorded, where they all said it never happened. And suddenly the alleged dates of the molestation changed beyond the video. Initially, the prosecutors were claiming the molestation started on a particular date, And when this evidence was discovered, they moved the date beyond that evidence. I mean, it was like, let's just adjust to what we have and make sure we go forward with the case, in my particular opinion.
This is the type of foolishness that made it into the courtroom, folks. This is what made it into the courtroom. So the whole false imprisonment allegations that was levied against Michael, that was also bullshit, because the Arvizos went to a number of places during their supposed imprisonment and never tried to contact any authorities for help. So get this, after escaping twice, they willingly went back to Neverland and they were just living their life like nothing was going on. It doesn't make sense here. We can bring that theme back if you want to make it make sense, because at this point it doesn't. And
yes,
then
I live by that. Make it make sense. Go ahead.
Yes. So the whole abduction story was shut down, by the way, because Chris Tucker testified that the Arvizos asked him to take them to Florida. They went there on their own and on their own will, and Jackson did not organize that trip.
The last witness I called was actor-comedian Chris Tucker. And Chris Tucker testified that this family, who was accusing Michael Jackson, had tried to hustle him. They wanted his car. They told him the child had cancer, like Michael Jackson was told. He invited them to a day in Las Vegas where they were filming the film Rush Hour 1. They stayed 3 weeks and billed him for everything. They kept asking him for money, and he flew to Miami, and he met Michael Jackson at a hotel, and he said, "Be careful, something is wrong." He warned Michael Jackson about this accuser and his family.
The siblings and the mom, they were all in on this together. I mean, and I think Tom Mesereau, I think he brilliantly proved this with his cross-examination of Star Arvizo, right? So that's Gavin's brother. While on the stand, Tom Mesereau hands Gavin's brother, Star, a straight male adult magazine. And he asked Star, "Is this the magazine that Mr. Jackson showed them?" Star said, "Yes." The magazine was dated after their last date at Neverland.
One of the issues, a dirty magazine he claimed he'd seen that Michael had shown him, that turns out the particular magazine that Mesereau pulled out of this bag was dated long after the boy had left Neverland.
Right. I mean, this was the moment that apparently there was more of a gasp in the courtroom. Remember, he is the witness. He is the one who saw Michael Jackson allegedly molesting his brother. And yet, on different occasions, he described what he saw quite differently, and Tom Mesereau pointed that out.
The jury's taking copious notes. They're hearing these inconsistencies. I think we all are.
There's a whole lot of other things that went on. I mean, Tom Mesereau, he was an absolute master in that courtroom. But I mean, when you're dealing with allegations like this, anyone can go in that courtroom at that point and be a master, but Tom Mesereau, he really pulled out all the stops here. Now, this is just one example of how Tom Mesereau was picking apart the prosecution and their quote-unquote witnesses. The media, they just wasn't reporting on the massacre that was happening in that courtroom.
Mm-hmm.
And you know something? I mean, and I've stated this publicly on a few occasions, okay? I believe that Michael Jackson's indictment had nothing to do with the Arvizos and, their allegations, which I think was total bullshit. But the only reason why the grand jury indicted Jackson was because of a decade of sensationalism, folklore, and misinformation. They were already prejudiced to the fact that Michael Jackson, quote unquote, paid hush money. And we talked about that the last episode. There was no hush money paid. And, this is what they were told for over a decade. And then all of a sudden, Michael was accused of this crime for the second time. This grand jury, they thought that they had their answer. Now, what they say about grand juries will indict a ham sandwich because they pretty much, that's how easy it is to get indicted. But they did not indict Jackson, and there were two grand juries in 1993 and 4. They did not indict Jackson, neither one of those two grand juries. That also tells you how bogus the 1993 case was as well, to be honest with you.
Because I also learned that most people in that community thought the DA was on a vendetta to get Michael Jackson. He had convened a grand jury in the early 90s to try and get an indictment, and he had failed. The grand jury met for approximately 6 months and would not charge Michael Jackson with anything. And I have since spoken to someone who was on that grand jury quite recently from Los Angeles. She was on a Los Angeles grand jury that was convened at the same time, and they had real problems with these accusations and real problems with a sense that people were trying to get money out of Michael Jackson by generating these charges. So he failed to get an indictment in the early 90s. In the mid-90s, the district attorney flew to Australia and Canada. They're the only countries I know that he went to. He may have gone to others, looking for victims of Michael Jackson. He failed. They told him to get lost. He didn't do anything to us. He had a website at the Sheriff's Department looking for information on Michael Jackson, and finally got the case that you know about because it was tried this year. And as Professor Ogletree said, 10 felony counts, not guilty, 4 lesser included misdemeanor counts, not guilty. Didn't even hang him on misdemeanors.
Excellent point. And I just want to add my little 2 cents to what you were saying, because you were mentioning that the family going away and coming back to Neverland, because Michael was actually charged with abduction, or was he charged with conspiracy to abduct?
He was actually charged with conspiracy. That is true. But there were also, on top of just conspiracy, there was, like you said, conspiracy to abduct. And the entire abduction claim was definitely ruled out whenever Chris Tucker testified there.
Yeah, because of Chris Tucker's testimony, and because, as you said, the family claimed to have escaped Neverland, but they kept going back. So you can't go back to where you claim to have escaped. Right. Anyway.
The mother had testified that she'd been held hostage at Neverland. Mesereau was able to produce a witness who'd in fact given her a spa treatment at that time.
Did she call for help? No. Did she tell the person at the spa that she was being held against her will? No. What did she do? She had a body wax.
She went on shopping sprees and even had dental surgery, never once mentioning that she was being held captive.
Well, since you said that mentioned the 1993-1994 grand jury's voting not to indict Michael twice, and the only reason the grand jury in 2003 chose to indict him was because of the previous decade of sensationalism. Let's dive into that. For instance, a lot of people don't believe the allegations, but think it's weird that Michael talked about sharing a bed with children. Could you break down for our viewers what Michael really meant and how it was completely twisted, as usual, by the media?
Yeah, sure thing. And let's clarify a few things. Jackson has never invited any children to his bed. Jackson has never pursued any child. They and their parents have only ever pursued him. Michael Jackson didn't just share his room with people of a certain age or sex. Michael Jackson's bedroom wasn't an intimate setting like mine and yours and most people. He had a no room off limit policy except for his office, with 24-hour staff allowed to come and go when they need it. Kids and parents weren't strangers that Michael just met off of the streets. They were families that he had friendships and bonds with, sort of like friends and relatives that you would allow to babysit your own kids. Jackson's room was a 2-story bedroom, larger than my first house, I might add, okay? So let's hear actually what Macaulay Culkin says about these sleepovers.
What's the relationship that you had with Michael Jackson?
Had or have? I mean, it's kind of,
both.
You know, whatever.
Let's go with had to
listen,
have.
No, he's a good friend of mine, and he still is. I mean, everything that's going on, I mean, it's unfortunate. It's an unfortunate situation for everyone involved. And the thing is, I didn't react to him the way most people did. Most people like, Michael Jackson. And, you know, I mean, he was a god to people. And to me, he was, you know, I knew he was a pop singer, but beyond that, you know, I wasn't one of the fans. I think that's one of the reasons why we connected, was the fact that, you know, believe me, I call him a jerk all the time. I call him a fathead and this and that, you know,
and your brother knew him too?
Yeah, no, we all did. I mean, he was, you know, a family friend.
And what happened at the house? That's what all these things that people
you know,
are
that's
concerned
what's
about.
so weird, you know.
What did happen?
Nothing happened, you know. I mean, nothing really. I mean, we played video games, you know. We you know, played it at his amusement park. Well, the thing is with that whole thing is that, you know, they go, oh, you slept in the same bedroom as him. It's like, I don't think you understand. Michael Jackson's bedroom is 2 stories. And it has like 3 bathrooms and this and that. So when I slept in his bedroom, yeah, but you have to understand the whole scenario. And the thing is with Michael is that he's not very good at explaining himself, and he never really has been, because he's not a very social person. I mean, you're talking about someone who's been sheltered and sheltering himself also for the last like 30 years, or, you know, and so he's not very good at communicating to people, and not very good at conveying what he's actually trying to say to you. And so when he says something like that, people, he doesn't quite understand why people react the way that they do.
Why do you think he likes young people so
It's because it's the same reason why he liked me, was the fact that I didn't care who he was. That was the thing. I talked to him like he was a normal human being. And that's what, and kids do that to him, because he's not, he's Michael Jackson, the pop singer, but he's not the god of, the king of pop or anything like that. He's just, a guy who's actually very kid-like himself and wants to go out there and wants to play video games with you.
Did your parents
like
encourage it?
They weren't against it. It wasn't like they encouraged it or like pushing me upon it. It was just kind of like I wanted to hang out with him, and they were fine with it.
So what do you make of what he's going through now?
Like I said, it's unfortunate, and it's a circus right now.
You think it's a bad rap?
I think so, yeah. Listen, like, look what happened the first time this happened to him. If someone had done something like that to my kid, I wouldn't just settle for some money. I'd make sure the guy was in jail, and it just really goes to show, as soon as, they got the money and they ran, that's really what happened the first time.
More people have described their experience as being similar to Macaulay Culkin's than those who have falsely accused Jackson of child abuse. To believe the false allegations is to ignore dozens of witnesses, including the likes of Elizabeth Taylor.
Because I've been there, when his nephews were there, and we all were in the bed watching television. There was nothing abnormal about it. There was no touchy-feeling going on. We laughed like children. And we watched a lot of Walt Disney. There was nothing odd about it.
Some think that Jackson having a home, which included an amusement park, is somehow proof that he's a pedophile. In fact, Jackson owning Neverland is the exact opposite of what a pedophile would do. Jackson has never fit the profile of a pedophile. In 2006, ABC ran this television special, and they had a whole lineup of different psychologists all stating the same thing, that Jackson's behavior is unusual for a pedophile.
Wir müssten uns darüber unterhalten, wer ist Michael Jackson wirklich? Und Michael Jackson wirklich ist ein extrem verwundbarer Mensch, naiver Mensch. Martin Bashir hat ihn abgezockt, er hat ihn ausgenutzt. Gesehen. Er ist nicht der klassische Kinderschänder, der Kinder schändet, um seinen eigenen Lustgewinn zu befriedigen. Er ist also kein Pädophiler, sondern er ist eigentlich Kind, naiv. Er ist wirklich jemand, der sagt, er schläft nicht mit Kindern, er schläft bei Kindern. Und das ist ein Riesenunterschied. Weil, und auch das vielleicht abgerundet in einem Satz, weil eigentlich niemand bei ihm geschlafen hat, bei ihm war, ihn getröstet hat. Und das ist die tiefste Wunde in seinem Herzen, die er nun versucht zu schließen, indem er eigentlich das, was er selber nicht erfahren hat, an Kinder weiterzugeben.
Ich glaube, dass wir...
Das ist die Psyche von Michael.
And this description is supported by Brett Barnes, who remains a stark defender of Michael Jackson today, who says that Michael Jackson slept on one side of the bed fully clothed, and he slept on the other side. And this is exactly what Dr. Speck described Jackson doing, what Jackson meant and what Jackson did.
Something bad about a child that made me feel really mad.
When you'd have sleepovers and you'd stay in the same room or the same bed, did that seem unusual to you at all?
No. Because I slept on one side of the bed, he slept on the other, and that was that.
And believe it or not, even Wade Robson, whenever he was telling truth when he was a child, and his sister Chantel explained that the sleepovers were exactly as Brett Barnes described.
As with 11-year-old Brett Barnes, interviewed Wednesday by CNN, Joy Robson and her two children say they frequently stayed at Jackson's ranch.
Yeah, there's been different times where it'd just be me and Michael. Then there'd be other times where he has other friends over too. This is what Brett said, it's just a slumber party. We just have a lot of fun.
And I've slept in the same bed as Michael. It's just you watch cartoons, you fall asleep. It's just a friendship. And I know he would never do anything to hurt my brother. He's the nicest guy you've ever met.
I've been there when these kids have been in Michael's room. I've been there with them. It's just party time. They watch videos, they eat junk food, they play video games. They play so hard they fall asleep. They're exhausted. They fall asleep. There's nothing more to it than that.
I think the most important thing you said there is it wasn't as the media portrayed it, that Michael was meeting all these random children and inviting them to sleep in his bed. These were families that Michael became close to. These were people that Michael considered an extended family and who also treated him like a member of the family. When this convo is brought up, I always say it's like having your child stay with family, someone that you trust. These aren't strangers. These are members of my extended family. That was Michael's thinking. Of course, with Michael being somewhat naive about the world's perceptions and very childlike himself, he knew he wasn't doing anything wrong, so he felt he didn't need to change his behavior. Now, having said that, I do understand the perception of it and how it looks. But as you said, Michael's bedroom was 2 stories high, and I thought his bedroom was 1,000 square feet, which is huge. But now I'm learning that it was actually closer to 2,000 or 3,000 square feet. This wasn't a typical bedroom.
You know, when they said that they were sleeping in Michael's room, you remember all that nonsense?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Did you know that Michael's bedroom, and I'm talking about the house, forget the house, Michael's bedroom was 3,000 square feet?
It was like a 2-story house all on its own, pretty much, yeah.
His bedroom, just the bedroom, forget the living room, forget the library, forget the God knows what else, was 3,000 square feet.
I think a lot of the things the prosecution tried to do, we were able to neutralize by basically putting it into a different perspective. The prosecutors, and I've heard tonight, he sleeps with boys, sleeps with boys, sleeps with boys. Well, we showed he sleeps with mothers, he sleeps with sisters, he sleeps with all kinds of people because they wanted to sack out in his room, which was about as big as his building. I mean, the prosecution were out to get him in the best way they could. I understand that. But I think the person they chose as the victim, as the accuser, and particularly that person's family, were really a disaster for them.
Also, there were many instances where Michael never slept in the bed. If you go back to what Michael said, he said that when he had guests, friends, extended family, whatever you want to call them, staying at his home, he didn't just offer them a guest bedroom or let them stay in a guest house. He would literally let them stay in his bedroom if they wanted to. That's the kind of person he was.
I'm sleeping in a sleeping bag on the floor. I gave him the bed because he has a brother named Star. So him and Star took the bed, and I'm on the floor in the sleeping bag.
So he would literally let his guests sleep in his bed while he slept in a sleeping bag on the floor, which is exactly what happened with Gavin Arvizo. And, although that probably wasn't the best idea after the 1993 allegations, he was resolute in the fact that he was innocent and he did nothing wrong. Is that stubborn? Yes. Can you criticize Michael for not making the necessary changes after the 1993 allegations? Yes. However, that does not make him a child predator, and there is a multitude of evidence that proves his innocence.
I never thought this jury would penalize Michael Jackson because he has long hair, because he has a serious skin condition which I have witnessed. It's called vitiligo. He has shown me his skin. If you look at his back, you will see brown patches and white patches. It's changing and eating pigment in his skin. He's very embarrassed with that. He chose to put white makeup on his face rather than have these splotches all over his face. That's his choice. I don't think it's a crime to do that. And the media kept portraying him as so weird and so strange, and I would say to people, turn on the TV any night and look at people who are stranger than Michael Jackson. He is creative. He dances to his own drummer. On a tape we played to the jury, he said, you like to go to ball games. I like to sit in my tree and make music. Yes, he's different. Yes, he's a musical genius. Yes, he's had his problems. Yes, he's a human being. And no, he's not a criminal.
In fact, when this situation happened, where Gavin slept in Michael's bedroom and Michael slept on the floor, he also had staff or security sleeping in the room with him as a witness that nothing occurred. Because that's why, what's his name? Frank.
Frank Cassio?
Yeah, that's why the prosecution charged him as a co-conspirator, because when Gavin did sleep in the bedroom with Michael, they slept on the bed, Michael slept in the sleeping bag, and he had Frank in the bedroom, so that there would be a witness that nothing happened.
Gavin came to Michael and said, Michael, could we sleep in your room tonight? And Michael looked at me and says, I don't know, you know, I think you better ask your mother. Oh, we already asked our mother. She says, sure, no problem. I'm like, no, this is something's odd. This is not right. And then as I was about to go tell Gavin that he cannot sleep in Michael's room, Michael says, okay, I have a solution for this. You have to sleep in the room with me. The two children slept on the bed, and Michael and I slept on the floor.
What I love and what can't be understated enough is that Michael never invited that. and it's like what's funny in every event of telling that story, from accusers to defenders and everything, it's always been the same thing of like they would ask and he would like ask your mom only if it's okay with your mom. And it's like, you know, people really who don't follow closely, especially, really treat it like, come on, come share the bed, come stay in my bed. Like, no, he never invited it. And I love how Lisa Marie defended him in the Diane Sawyer interview in 95 or 96, where she was saying, like, the kids will try to follow him to the bathroom. I've had to take them out of, like, no. He will be nice, like, no, get out.
Okay, when you say boys, it's not just boys, and I've never invited just boys to come in my room. Come on, that's ridiculous. And that's a ridiculous question. But since people want to hear it, you know, the answer, I'll be happy to answer it. I have never invited anyone into my bed, ever. Children love me, I love them, they follow me, they want to be with me. But anybody can come in my bed. A child can come in my bed if they want.
I can say, sorry, I've seen this. I've seen it a lot. I've seen kids. I've seen him with children in the last year. I've seen it enough to where I can see how that can happen. It's, you know, I just wanted to say that I've seen these children, they don't let him go to the bathroom without running in there with him. And they won't let him out of their sight. So when he jumps in the bed, I'm even out. You know, they jump in the bed with him.
And you know, Lisa Marie, she gets a lot of flack, but truth is, Lisa has always done two things. She's always defended Michael Jackson's heterosexuality, and she's always defended against the charges or what have you. And she's never wavered. She's never wavered. So that's one thing, you know, I mean, I definitely respect out of Lisa Marie Presley, among many other things.
That touches on something I wanted to ask. So what do you say to people who have that rebuttal of, oh, like, where were the women in his life? Or the people who say there's like rumors out there about him not actually sleeping with the women. So if he wasn't with the kids, then who was he with?
Well, I think that the record speaks for itself as far as, you know, some of the women who has been in and out of Michael's life. And it's like Frank DeLeo, it's like what he said in Spike Lee's Bad 25 documentary. I think it was Bad 25. It could have been.
You're right. It was Bad 25. I just watched both recently.
Okay, good. So it's like what Frank DeLeo said there. Like, he knows of you know, women that Michael has been with, and you know that he's going to take that to his grave or what have you. Michael was a gentleman. And another thing we know about Michael as well is that, you know, he was fiercely private. So if you read, like, I mean, there's texts out there. For example, there's a book by Michael Jackson's bodyguard, Bill and Javon. It's called Remember the Time Protecting Michael Jackson. In this book, they talk about a woman who they refer to as Friend.
There were two other people who came out to see him, and they were a complete surprise to us. A couple weeks into our stay, he came to me and he told me that a friend was coming to visit. I asked, "Is this someone that I need to vet?" He said, No, she's okay." Over the next couple days, whenever we discussed making arrangements for this person, he only referred to her as Friend. We drove in and picked her up at Dulles. She had my number and called me from the terminal to tell us where to pick her up. She had an Eastern European accent, maybe German. We pulled in outside the baggage claim, she flagged us down, and we helped put her luggage in the back of the car.
This woman was drop-dead gorgeous. She had dark, curly hair that sort of hung in her face a bit, petite, about 5'4", nice body, real slender. She was staying at this hotel in Chantilly, a Hampton Inn, about 45 minutes from where we were in Middleburg. We got her checked in and let Mr. Jackson know.
She was in town maybe 2 days before Mr. Jackson went to see her. I would take him on these little rendezvous. Late at night, after the kids had gone to bed, Javon would stay back to keep an eye on them, and I would drive Mr. Jackson to this Hampton Inn. We'd sneak in through the emergency exit. I'd escort him to her room, then wait outside for him to call. The first time we went, he was there for maybe 4 hours. He never spent the night. He was always back at the house by the time the kids woke up for breakfast, and he never brought this woman around his children. We went back the next night and a couple more times after that.
So Friend would, I think she would fly in from overseas somewhere, and Michael would get Friend in his limo. Like, in fact, one evening, Friend is in this limo, and then with Michael, and they're in D.C. They're in Washington, D.C.
When Friend came back, one night Mr. Jackson said he wanted to take her into D.C. He wanted her to see the Lincoln Memorial and some of the sights, so we got the truck ready. It was around midnight. While we were driving, they were in the back, talking and whispering. The curtain was closed and we had the radio up to give them some privacy. We parked the car about a block and a half from the Washington Monument. When we pulled up, I turned the radio down to tell Mr. Jackson we'd arrived. And all we heard was smacking lips behind that curtain. I knew exactly what that sound was. They were making out back there. I didn't want to interrupt them, but I just coughed a bit and said, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Jackson, we're here. Oh, okay, great. Let's go.
And they actually get pulled over because I think that, they could see the Lincoln Monument or something like that from where they were. And they get pulled over by all people, Secret Service, right? And, Secret Service finds out that it's Michael Jackson in the back. Michael was real concerned about Friend being found out. Anyways, that ended up with Michael Jackson pretty much giving him their autograph. They were thankful for that autograph.
I pulled the curtain back a bit. Mr. Jackson, these gentlemen would like to know if you'd give them an autograph. Oh, sure, he said. Just give me a pen. The agent gave me a pen and pulled off a piece of paper from his pad. Mr. Jackson opened up the curtain and took the paper and pen. This guy was totally starstruck. Mr. Jackson signed the paper and gave it to the guy. Then the other agent ran up saying, Whoa, can I get one too? The back window went down. Mr. Jackson said hello to the other guy and signed an autograph for him. They told us thank you and good night, and as they walked away, the second agent turned to the first and said, Holy shit, man, we just met Michael Jackson. That was better than meeting the president.
There are many stories about Michael Jackson sharing nights and evenings and days with women of all races, to be honest with you, and more than just one witness saying it. And what I normally say to people, I said, as much as I want to know about Michael Jackson's sex life, truth be told, is none of my goddamn business. So that's how, I typically answer that question. I want to finish this off by, finish telling this story about Friend, because this is a story that they tell in that book. And I just found it, kind of made my heart skip a beat. But they said that Friend finds out that Michael ends up passing. And, she wanted nothing but to, go to the memorial. But if you guys remember, you needed tickets to get into the memorial at the Staples Center. And the Friend would end up getting her tickets and saying her last goodbyes. And no one knew who the hell she was there, but Michael's bodyguards did. They knew who she was. So she got to see Michael off, and I think that was a touching story. So
I love that book.
Yeah.
It's fantastically done. Like, the book does a really good job of humanizing him from two bodyguards who, as they kind of put themselves, they were fans, but it sounds like casual fans at best. And like, they got a whole view of how, quote unquote, normal-ish he was. He wasn't the monster or the weirdo everyone made him out to be. And when it came to his women, he was fiercely protective over them and over their identities and all that.
You hit that nail on the head there where you said the book is so good at humanizing Michael Jackson, especially that Chuck E. Cheese strip, if you remember that in the book.
Yeah.
I love that, but it was good.
And to what we spoke about last time, how when he was bored, it's okay. Let's go give homeless people money, and that's just who he was, and that the poor people knew him, and he knew the poor people, and like it really would be a case of like there was a couple who would fight all the time, and I'll give you the money, but don't fight over it.
I love that. I love that. Like he literally paid the guy that the woman was with to not fight her because he gave her money. I thought, man, like that. Everyone should know about that.
To put it in context too, if this is new for you, so yeah, he would hand homeless money, but he would always give the women more than the men. And so there was a couple where the guy noticed that, and like Michael did that the first time with them, and he also saw when he pulled away, like a fight begin, and all. After that, then don't fight.
He pulled out 3 $100 bills, gave them to her, and said, "Here, take this." She was floored. She was almost crying, saying, "Thank you, thank you, thank you."
After he gave her the money, she backed up a few steps and I started to drive off. The guy that had been sitting near her got up, came over to her and tried to snatch the money away. She pulled back, but he kept trying to grab it from her and they started fighting again. Mr. Jackson saw that and said, "No, no, no. Javon, stop the car. Pull back over." He leaned back out of the window and called the man over this time saying, "Don't do that. Here, I've got something for you too." He pulled out another $300 and gave it to the man. The lady started crying like she'd been saved.
I just want to remind everybody that that's Joe Jackson's son. So for all the foolishness about the women, I'm just saying, like, yes, it's a little different, but this is Joe Jackson's son.
I think Tito said it best. If you think Michael Jackson is gay, you leave your woman with him and find out if he's gay or not. That's what Tito recently said. So
That's a very good point too, because in J. Randy Terrell's book, but also other books too, it's just been put in place that he saw how his father and his brothers treated women, and especially his father, how he treated his sweet mother and everything. And so Michael's thing was always not to be them. Famously, you kind of learn with reading things too. A huge reason Michael wasn't that fond of Prince as a person was because his reputation with women reminded him of his brothers. So it's like Michael had a completely different approach and way about treating women.
And to piggyback on that, well, first of all, I want to say that I don't think it matters. Well, we know that Michael was straight, but it doesn't matter if Michael was gay or straight, because being gay doesn't automatically make you a child predator or,
that's true.
Exactly.
I want to throw some things out there, and I'm open to having them corrected. I was just going to say, if we're talking about the Arvizos, I think people also need to understand Neverland, in that it's not really a place that's hard to be kept in or out of. Like, you can basically step over the fences there, and plenty of people have done it. People have broken into the house lots of times without MJ's knowledge. So, and I think even the Arvizos, I think there's like evidence that they were like out like at the spa or something, like during the supposed time that they were being held at Neverland. So it's like you basically you step over some wooden post and you're out of Neverland. And staying at Neverland, I think most people think of it as just you're staying at somebody's house. I don't think they realize there's like multiple houses there that you stay in, and that even if you were talking about being in his bedroom itself is a house. It has like a living room and bathrooms. And I think Star said that he snuck up on MJ touching his brother, and MJ doesn't know that he saw it. But if you go down the hallway to Neverland, I believe there's an alarm, and then if you go up the stairs to where his bed was, there was another alarm. So it's like you can't even sneak in there. So I don't think people really understand the layout of Neverland and really just everything about it. I think they think of it from a perspective of just their house.
Speaking of the alarms, because of the lies in the media, people think that Michael installed the alarm to warn him when people were coming, as it relates to the allegations. Of course, that's not true, but we do need clarification on whether the alarm was already installed by the previous owners, because I've always thought that the alarms were present before Michael even moved in. Or did Michael install the alarm himself? Because we've heard that as well. Also, could you break down why the alarm was present in Michael's home, specifically his bedroom? because although I'm not sure of whether or not the alarm was installed by Michael or was there before he even got there, what I am 100% certain on is the media's reports about it are inaccurate.
I want to correct the record on that. So Macaulay Culkin's dad actually wrote in his book that Michael, in fact, did have the alarm system installed, but this was only because Michael came home one day, and this is a true story, and in his closet, and possibly had been there for weeks, don't know how they were eating or anything, but been there for an undisclosed amount of time, was a fan of the female gender. And Michael at that point was like, goodness, like, I mean, if this person can come onto my property, stay here, literally live, and then she's still here, then, you know, maybe I should do something to protect myself. So Macaulay Culkin's dad does write in his autobiography, I think. I don't know, but he writes in some book that Jackson did, in fact, have the alarm installed for that particular reason. I mean, Neverland was a place where it was so large, you could literally parachute somewhere onto the property and not be near like the park or the main house or anything like that, but you could walk there. Like, that's how big the property was. So, but I'm going to tell you one thing about that alarm. In the 2005 trial, though, it was completely debunked that the alarm worked the way that Gavin, it was either Gavin or Starr, but maybe both, how, you know, they said that it worked. Because like you stated there, they said that the alarm worked to notify Jackson that someone was coming or whatever, you know, for him to stop doing whatever he was doing. So if that's the case, okay, if that was true, as Mesereau managed to prove once again on the stand, if that was true, how then did Starr claim that he's seen Michael abusing Gavin if Michael supposedly had enough time to actually stop doing that, right? How did Starr, quote unquote, see this, right?
Well, and you know, it was really, really another thing that was annoying that nobody seemed to pay any attention to. And I apologize, but I was screaming at Bob Sanger, come on, say something. You know, they talked about when Starr was testifying, they talked about how Starr had gone up the stairs and he saw all this activity happening. And then they turned around and they said that Michael had alarm systems set up. So if somebody went up the stairs, it would trigger the alarm system so that he would stop whatever it was that he was doing. And that's why he wasn't getting caught. Well, wait a minute. Starr's the size of a Buick. How did he get past the system? I mean, the kid was what, like 5'3", 280 pounds?
Yeah.
So it's not like he could turn sideways and sneak past it. So how did Starr manage to get up the stairs if they say it had an alarm, the alarm was intact, the alarm was functioning? Again, they made statements that if you really paid attention to were completely idiotic. You know, and those are the kinds of things that I would bring to everybody's attention. How is this possible? You have an alarm. The alarm is there because you're a child molester. You put the alarm in play, yet this guy with a license plate strapped to his ass can get past it. I just don't get it.
Also, what's important to note is that there was open door policy. The only thing that had a lock to it was the wine cellar. And the wine cellar, I think, was in the arcade. And somehow the Arvizo brothers and Davlin, their sister, they end up learning what the code is to get into that cellar. So staff, if I'm not mistaken, they even testified seeing Davlin or maybe the boys drunk on the property or intoxicated or, you know, apparently intoxicated. That's where, you know, some of the charges of providing an intoxicating substance to or agent to, you know, a minor comes from. I think there was like 6 or 8 different charges based on that alone. That's where some of those charges come from, the staff claiming that they seen these kids drunk. And you know what? They probably did. You know, like they probably did. But guess what else? Michael wasn't on the property when they were.
Yeah.
So
I think that's another great point because, as we mentioned before, with the prosecution charging Frank Cascio as a co-conspirator to explain away him being a witness that nothing inappropriate happened in Michael's bedroom, the same is true in this situation. Along with charging Michael with child abuse, they also added numerous charges charges to explain away the actions of the Arvizo family. For instance, as you said, to explain away the Arvizos coming and going as they pleased from the Neverland Ranch, they charged Michael with conspiracy to abduct. Then to explain away the evidence that the kids had broken into Michael's wine cellar, they charged him with plying minors with alcohol. So basically, the prosecution knew that the Arvizo families were scammers and con artists, but they were so determined to get Michael on something, they added as many charges as they could, and most of those charges were about explaining away the actions of the Arvizo family.
Yeah, there's also, as I recall, or what have you, there's also evidence that exists that Davlin, she would actually consume alcohol outside of Neverland, like with her friends that, of course, were older than Gavin. And, she also hang out with older friends. Also, as far as Star is concerned, Star is known as an adult to have an issue with alcohol or what have you. So I think Star actually ends up getting arrested a few years back for going into a drunken rage. And
oh, wow.
I think he has assault charges from his then ex-girlfriend and everything.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so alcohol does appear to be a problem within that family.
It sounds like from what you keep saying, like out of each case, there's criminal activity on the part of everyone but Michael Jackson. But like if you look at the other side, there's all types of history and records. Whereas for him, he doesn't have it. He only has claims that people are making who actually have the records.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
I'm shook. I never knew that. So that's new information for me. Star drinking.
Yeah, it's like it's a lot of revelations tonight about stuff that I didn't even know about. So yeah.
I had no. Stay off the sauce.
Let's see. Is it true that Janet Arvizo, mother to the 2003 accuser, contacted a civil lawyer about suing Michael Jackson before she even met him?
Well, the answer to this question is a lot more complex than you may think on the surface. This could be true or false, actually. I'm aware of the rumor and have been for years. Tom Mesereau cross-examined her and at one point asked Janet if she started investigating Michael through various lawyers on January 1st of 2000, before she even met Michael for the first time. Janet never provided a clear answer. Her answer was so all over the place, in fact, that Tom Mesereau asked the judge to order the witness to answer the question. Even after she was ordered to answer the question, she never provides a direct answer. Tom Mesereau then says to the court that he didn't believe that his question was actually answered, right? So he was willing at that point just to leave it up to the court's discretion, whether or not to pursue getting it out of her or just to move on. The judge in this case requested that Tom Mesereau just ask his next question, pretty much letting Janet off the hook in that point. Now, it's not clear why Janet didn't directly answer the damn question to begin with. If she had nothing to hide, why didn't she just provide a direct response? What were her motives? Some say it was obvious that her plan was to get into MJ's inner circle and get something big out of it, like money, favors, gifts, or perhaps even false allegations. Others say that it was Janet going by what she thought was best for her case and what the prosecution wanted her to say. The answer to this, just to answer your question, I think it's inconclusive. Either way, I don't think it is pertinent to proving that Janet had credibility issues and that they were always after one thing to begin with. And not just with Michael, but with other companies and people. And we are aware of Janet's welfare fraud when after she wins the JCPenney case for, I think, to the tune of $150,000, she continues to collect welfare without reporting that she had won this case, as she's legally required to do so. On top of that, we learned through various testimonies that Janet also was collecting money for Gavin's health care or what have you, when in fact, Gavin had a health care plan where he was fully covered on his dad's health insurance. Something else I don't want to leave out about Janet is Carol Lemire's on-record statements. Carol was the hairstylist to the stars, and that includes MJ, his nephews, the 3T, and she was also acquainted with Janet and the family separately. Now, she's on record of saying that in 2000, Janet's daughter, Davlin, Gavin's sister, and so on and so forth, said, Mom says Michael is going to buy us a house in Hollywood Hills.
One day she went to see her mother, and she came back and she said to me that they were getting a big house in Hollywood Hills. I said, how is your mother buying a house in Hollywood Hills when they live in a garage? Oh, we're getting, and she went to say something about Michael, and she shut up. And I kind of caught on to something to that. And then I think that's when they did the interview. I just remember her telling me how she would beat them with hangers and how she'd make them go in stores and steal, and how she lied something with pennies where she got a bunch of money. She made up some story and won all this money, and just the con games she was teaching them. And Gavin was staying with me because she didn't want to be around it, and she loved her dad.
Carol found that very odd and began questioning her and said the daughter blurted out that the mother was going to blackmail MJ over false allegations. When Carol got upset and started telling her off, that's when Davlin actually started backtracking, and she claimed that she was just joking.
Oh, wow.
That's everything to that question.
I never knew that.
I'm glad you brought up Carol Lemire because I've listened to her do an interview before, and she said the same thing about hearing that from Gavin's sister. She said that she was either with MJ or on the phone with him when the Chandler situation went public, and she said Jordan was crying to MJ saying, like, I don't know why my dad would do this, or something to that effect.
Because you told Taj and I about how you had been present for this phone call with Michael.
I was there, and Jordan was crying, saying, why is my dad doing this?
Can you just talk us through that? You know, what was going, where were you that day? What was happening?
I came over to do his hair, and he was very upset because of what was going on. I mean, extremely upset, because I think that's when the pills started.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember he called, and he was crying, the little kid, and telling him, I don't know why they're saying this. He was very upset, but both of them were.
And she's also said that I want to say the guy she said she was talking to when she watched Living with Michael Jackson was Gavin's father. Again, I'm open to being corrected, but she said that he was saying, oh, yeah, she's about to make her move. Watch, Gavin's going to lay on his shoulder.
One day, the father, there was this interview with what was that guy's name from London?
Martin Bashir.
The father said to me, Carol, they're up to something. They're up to something. And I said, what do you mean? He said, my son's going to lay on his shoulder. And that's exactly what he did. He said, my wife's getting ready to play her con games. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, just watch. She's going to go after him for money.
Wow. I didn't know she watched that with Gavin's father.
I believe that's who it was.
It was.
Yeah,
You're not mistaken. You're not mistaken about that.
Wow. Like I said, a lot of stuff I didn't know about. I'm learning tonight. Learning with everybody else.
I'm just offended she was risking her life for J.C. Penney. At least go to Macy's or something. Like, ooh, really? Like J.C. Penney? All right.
She was risking it all for J.C. Penney. Well, I think that thoroughly covered everything as it relates to the 2003 allegations and the 2005 trial. However, we will have links below so that you can do research about the allegations on your own. But let's pick this up next time with the topic that I'm sure that everyone is waiting on us to discuss, and that is extorting Neverland. Actually, I'm not going to correct that because that's exactly what happened, and you will see why I called it that next time in our next episode.